my name is Chris, and we're here at the IoT Security Foundation, back with another of our monthly webinars. Before we get things started, I want to mention IoTSF's next event, which takes place in London next week. It's going to be at 1 Birdcage Walk in Westminster. That's the name of the venue, and it will be what we call a plenary event, which is, I guess, a mini conference, if you like, and we've got a packed agenda for the day. So I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about it, just whilst everybody arrives. The registration desk will be open from 9:30 in the morning, and the nearest tube station is Westminster. It's then less than 5 minutes walk to the venue. I'll be the host for the day, and I'm looking forward to introducing a 40-minute segment from the IoTSF's Regulatory Watch Group. It will be a panel discussion covering the European CRA, RED, NIS2, PSTI, and all sorts of legislation from around the world. We'll then have a session from the IoTSF's Assurance Framework Group, which will have some very exciting news about their activity going forward. There'll also be sessions from the IoTSF's Smart Built Environment Group. There'll be a session on the Digital Security by Design Challenge, and to round things off, there'll be a global marketing report for cherry-based router and connected device infrastructure, together with a Q&A. Best of all, the whole event is free, and it's open to IoTSF members and non-IoTSF members. So if you can be in London this coming Wednesday, register now, as the event is approaching venue capacity. We've already had to adjust the seating plan to accommodate everybody, so we are nearly sold out. So move fast if you would like to be at our IoTSF plenary event in London this coming Wednesday. A bit later in today's broadcast, we'll have the top 6 requirements you need to fulfill in OT cyber security from a NIS2 perspective, and that's going to be with Johannes Naimi and Simon Loins of Tozzybox in Finland. But first up, we cross over to the Netherlands as I introduce Antoinette Hodes of Checkpoint. She joins us from Amsterdam, and she is a global solution architect and evangelist. Her presentation today is entitled Embracing Prevention First Practices and Strategies in the O2 Realm. Antoinette, an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us today, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this introduction. Let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen? Can somebody please let me know? Okay.
No problem, Antoinette.
Great. Let me put the video down because I don't like seeing myself out presenting. Thank you so much to my section of this webinar. Thanks IoTSF for having me. I'm happy to be here. My talk is all about cyber resilient OT. Critical assets, damn legacy systems, and you will learn why those legacy systems are damned, and hackers. My name is Antoinette Hodes. I'm a global solution architect. I've been working in IT and OT for 26 years now. I have a huge passion for technology and a personal mission, making internet a better, safer place for our children. We'll be discussing today the challenges for those legacy systems, how to apply industry best practices like IT and OT segmentation. We will touch on AI, the new kid on the block, supply chain attacks, and last but not least, compliance. So let me start with OT. What is operational technology? I try to outline the differences here because basically OT is the software and the hardware that's directly connecting to machinery. It's used to be to monitor, control, and automate all those systems. And as you can see here, the business priorities are very different. Safety, reliability, and availability is key. You don't want to have any downtime whatsoever. I always want to compare it with a laptop, for example. In this case, you see we have a laptop, and if, for example, there is a virus on that laptop, it's pushed to a quarantine VLAN. The virus dots should be updated, and an in-depth scan should be argued. And ideally, you want to have a report. Which file does it touch on? How did it came in? But in OT, it's very different. Zero downtime is required, and it should not impact the critical processes whatsoever. The targets are also very different. We have PLCs, HMIs, and RTUs, and the environment is completely different. In IT, it's air conditioned, and in OT, you have dusty environments, high radiation, constant vibration, and so forth. So it's very different process, and the architecture is also very different. And I hear you think, is OT then a separate environment? In many cases it is. But in enterprises, you have OT assets as well. Think, for example, of HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or building management systems. And they require in-depth and dedicated security controls. If we take a closer look to the critical infrastructures, OT, ICS, and SCADA systems, let's call it OT because they all fall in the realm of OT. They are managing and making sure that our daily lives is running, and it should not impact any vital processes whatsoever, because it can disrupt complete societies. And here you see some of those critical infrastructures. Of course, there is more, like food, for example. And I hear you think, what about the threats? Is this a really targeted environment? And I have to say, yes, OT threats are real. We see dedicated APTs, advanced persistent threats, for example. And here I outlined what the threat landscape with all OT hacks look like. And I can do a complete lecture about OT hacks again and alone, because it's so much, but I want to touch on one that's really important and came big in the news. That's the Danish critical infrastructure hack. And it was about unpatched vulnerabilities. Cell devices weren't patched, and there was a critical vulnerability of 9 and 10. And in case you don't know, 9 and 10 is the highest as you can go, and it requires immediate action, patching, upgrading, disconnecting. So that's really important. And this infrastructure hack impacted 22 organizations. Think, for example, of blackout, service disruption, and so on. And another one maybe that we can highlight here is the InController. It was targeting Schneider PLCs. So you see, the threat is real, and you need to man it up. So if we take a look at the challenges, it's not only technical challenges, but it's organizational challenges, standards, meaning compliance. There's a lack of security best practices, because when those systems were designed, there was no major focus on cybersecurity. It's basically back to the 80s. Those systems are never touched, and how to secure those legacy systems. And it's even worse. In the many OT environments, we see Windows Embedded or Windows XP. And we all know that Windows started supporting those operating systems a long time ago. And hackers, or maybe better to say cyber criminals, are aware about this, and they are looking on the internet for directly connected devices. And if you do a search on Shodan, Google Docs, and there are many others, a complete list is represented with login credentials, the IP address. So you need to man it up to make sure that those environments are properly secured. There's a knowledge gap, and I don't blame them, because if you are an OT operator, you are an expert in ladder logic and all the OT devices in that environment. And I can understand that there is no focus on cybersecurity, but you should. We have now regulations coming up that require cybersecurity measures in that environment. And we have the insider threat, either intentionally or unintentionally. And for example, USB stick, that's things that should be addressed, but how to overcome all those challenges. I also always start with a risk assessment, and I use this ISA formula to do my risk calculation, because it all starts with visibility. If I ask an OT administrator, do you have visibility? How many assets are connected to your network? They don't know. So it should start ideally with an asset discovery, looking for what devices. Do I have ABB, Schneider Electric, Rockwell devices? What protocols are being used? How does the architecture look like? And once this is in place, you can identify the threats, the actors, and the possible impact. And then you have a real good risk assessment. And you can apply that on the architecture that you want to design. And I will touch a little bit on that later on, but there are more complexities in those OT environments. They are very static. Remember that I told you it was back in the 80s, Windows 7 and Windows XP. So they have a very long life cycle. The outdated software, do you place a firewall in front of it? Or if it's a field device, how to handle that? You want to make sure that the device keeps on working as intended, because you can harm human lives, and safety is a real concern here. But last but not least on this slide, you want to secure intellectual property and trade secret. And if we take a look at last year, we see that manufacturing was the most targeted vertical in the OT realm. So how to safeguard those environments? So the risk assessment is really, really important. And I like the Purdue model, as you can see here. It's also known as the PARA model, and it's a layered architecture overview. Here you see firewalls, for example. Here you have clear segmentation between IT and OT. And this is helping you to apply the right security architecture either to manufacturing or energy companies, because they all have different security needs and architecture needs. You have to have in-depth ICS knowledge, which protocols are being used. Like, for example, Modbus. You want to make sure that only a relevant OT administrator can argue to a field device a write command, right? And we have seen in the past people from the IT zone directly connecting to the SCADA systems over here. Not a best practice at all. So you want to have layered security, segmentation, access control, dedicated OT threat prevention. So for example, here it is again, the embedded XP or Windows 7 devices. If you have them in your environment, you want to have IPS signatures in place, addressing those needs so the known attacks are being blocked with signatures. And if not possible, for example, in the field devices, because it could be very expensive to place a security gateway in front of all those field devices, system hardening is really, really important. So if we address all those OT challenges, you see that IT and OT segmentation is blurring. And why is that? Industrial IoT is here. It's connecting, it's open up the environment. We see cloud transformation. We see companies like Clarity, for example, opening up with cloud management. And OT environments in the past were completely closed. They had no connection with other networks, so-called air-gapped environments. So how to properly secure that when the attack surface is expanding and the cloud journey has started. Also, a really, really big one is supply chain vulnerabilities. Do you have visibility on the vulnerable third-party components in the products? A big challenge is compliance and security standards. And here we have AI, deep learning and machine learning. And I want to ask you a question. You can put it in the chat. When was the first time you heard about AI? And do you think it's good or is it a bad thing? And after the presentation, we can have an open discussion about it. I want to advocate here for a zero tolerance approach, saving our toasters and possibly the world, because you need to protect those environments with preventative security controls. Because on OT devices, you cannot install an endpoint solution, and how to maintain it. You cannot install it. There's a lack of hardware, lack of resources, and yet you need to secure that the device is safe and safety is guaranteed. And last but not least, the device is deterministic and should keep on working as intended. Another big thing that I haven't touched on is interoperability. And with the internet of everything, everything is becoming interconnected. Industrial IoT, we see assets connecting over LTE, Wi-Fi, cellular. So it's the borders are failing, and do you have the right security controls in place with security measures? So there's a new kit on the horizon as well here. Regulations. So here I made a list. There's a big difference between the US and Europe. Like the US, it's more In verticals, there are dedicated regulations for healthcare, automotive industry. And in Europe, we have a more general approach with the Cyber Resilience Act, GDPR. And just to name one example here, the NIS directive is a really important legislative act that's coming. And there's a reporting obligation in the NIS regulation. But we in the Netherlands had a huge debate about it because you need to share indicators of compromise and other breach information with national certs. And what if that information is coming in the wrong hands? So hackers, attackers, or better to say, cyber criminals have real visibility in the weakness of your network, right? So this is just to outline a few differences. We did a research at Checkpoint to all the regulations and legislative acts, and guess what? They all hold key elements. They are all mandating secure access and access control with login protection, password policies, no default or hard-coded passwords. Vulnerability management and reporting is also really important. Data protection, the biggest one, if you ask me, for the regulations. And I hear you think, why is data protection so important? There are 3 types of data. You have the data at rest, that's on the device, and ideally that should be encrypted. You have the data in transit. Think, for example, telemetry data that's being shared with a hybrid cloud setup, sharing metrics, and you have the data in use. And data in use is the most vulnerable and easy to compromise. So you want to have the right security controls in place. And at Checkpoint, we believe in a prevention first approach. We believe that once malware is inside, it's already too late. Think, for example, an OT device, you cannot remediate it. Okay, you can disconnect it, but basically the OT device can get infected over and over again. And while presenting the need for OT, industrial IoT security, I always use the fish tank hack. And it's already an old one, but in a casino in the US, there was a really nice fish tank. And in the fish tank, there was a smart thermometer. And the thermometer was monitoring the saltiness, the food, the temperature of the fish tank. And cyber criminals infiltrated that thermometer and jumped from the thermometer in the network and stole a lot of data. So you see the threat is real, and it really demonstrates that attackers, cyber criminals are really opportunistic. Combine that with AI that's now here and all the information that's available on Shodan and Google Docs. You need to step it up. Our mission is to safeguard those ecosystems, to protection for all cyber attacks, not only the known, but also the unknown, providing you a zero-day safe net, and that builds trust and user confidence. So if you want to know more on how we do that, you can ping me offline. I'm happy to have a discussion with you and to showcase the why better than the how. And I want to just touch on why it's needed. Now let's go now to AI. And AI is really interesting. I always tend to compare it with the second industrial revolution around 1900 with the first cars. And it was really funny because there were no regulations whatsoever, no traffic lights, no traffic rules. And there was a concept car, horsey horseless. And in that car, there should be a horse head in front of the car because people and horses were afraid what is the front or the back of the car. And that really is a nice alignment with IE, what we have right now. So artificial intelligence is here to stay. But if you ask me, we should have clear regulations, ethical regulations as well. And guess what? My country, the Netherlands, is #1 at the Global Index of Responsible AI. I heard about AI back in the 80s with Eric Drexler's Grey Goo, and it's about nanotechnology, like assemblers like this, and they were consuming everything on the earth. And this is really basically a potential thing, but now people are saying it can happen for real. So how does AI apply to OT? Is it really such a dark scenario as we have here. I don't think so. AI is bringing a lot of benefits to the industrial 4 realm with, for example, predictive maintenance, expanding the lifespan of an OT assets. We see proactive remediation because with the analytics that it has, it can detect anomalies in a much better way as human can. So they're minimizing the risk of breaches in the environment, quality control, real-time tracking. So there are a lot of positive use cases with AI. The other good thing that's with AI that's coming is the how to become green with a low emission and carbon footprint and waste reduction. Now over to the bad. If you ask me, you have to fight AI with AI because AI systems are very smart and they can attack, deceive, and bypass other AI and machine learning systems. You have adaptive attacks, and these attacks, they will learn how attack strategies happen in real time, and they are adjusting. And this is really, really important because traditional cybersecurity systems cannot detect such an attack. We have the behavioral analysis, as you can see here. It's basically about profiling IoT devices, what's default behavior, scanning for vulnerabilities, doing completely automated attacks without zero human intervention. Also really, really a bad thing. Adversarial attacks, that's the best one, if you ask me, because it can be used to trick AI making decisions, unintended decisions that have a huge impact. And remember that OT environments are used to secure critical environments. The impact can be massive, and you don't want to play with human lives or disrupting societies. The value of a compromised device is on the dark web even higher than the retail price itself. I wrote an article for the World Economic Forum about it. In Telegram channels, if you look for yourself, you can see these devices are being sold, even with tutorials, how to it's really easy to launch attacks against those environments. And yeah, OT security is really key. If we take a look at the future, we see that smart edge computing is coming, and I don't think the future is that dark, as Eric Drexler stated. Automation and robotics are taking it to the next level. Smart blockchain will come, secure supply chain, because that's also really important, and it will improve the energy consumption and sustainability. So that's basically it. I would like to conclude with a quote of Robert Mueller from the FBI. There are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. And Check Point, the company that I'm working for, is adding a third one, those that have been hacked and still don't know. So thank you so much. That was my presentation. Any questions?
Antoinette, thank you very much indeed. So everybody, you heard a question that Antoinette asked during her presentation. When was the first time you heard about AI, and is it a good or a bad thing? If you're watching today's broadcast live, just use the chat facility to answer Antoinette's question, and we'll go over some of the answers again. If you want to just keep it short, you can just put the year and good or bad. We can debate that. So Antoinette, thank you very much. Antoinette, as mentioned previously, the next IoTSF webinar will be on Thursday, the 25th of July, with Charte of Beko. He'll be joining us from Istanbul. If you're watching this broadcast live today, the registration link is in the Zoom chat, and you can register now. And if you scroll back up the Zoom chat, there's a bunch of links. There's information about the plenary event in London next week. There's information about the 2024 conference in October. There's our latest IoTSF monthly newsletter, a whole bunch of stuff. So if you're watching this live, go into the Zoom chat facility, scroll back up, and you'll see all of those links there. So let's get on with the Q&A section of today's broadcast. And Antoinette, earlier you asked, when did the audience first hear about AI, and is it a good thing? So as the answers have been coming in, I've been collating them. So Hazel.